Hey everyone, welcome to What Remains, a fan podcast where we dive into the collection of the Fredericksburg Area Museum. We'll explore the history and impact of the objects that were left behind and sometimes the things that aren't. So let's see what remains. I'm your host, Kylie Thomson, the Collection and Exhibitions Coordinator at the Fredericksburg Area Museum, and I'm joined today by
Clarissa Sanders, the Events and Operations Manager.
And we are so excited to do this, so I think we should dive right in.
So, Kylie, what do you have for us today?
Okay, so today we'll be talking about one of our newest acquisitions. It is fragments of a Rappahannock River Batteau. They're actually currently the last known pieces of this type of boat.
What's a Batteau?
Okay. So a Batteau is a long, shallow, flat-bottomed boat that has pointed ends. And these long boats were primarily used to navigate canal systems. And they were about 65 feet long and about 9 feet wide. This particular one was found on the Rappahannock near Waterloo during a drought by a river historian named Randy Carter in the 1950s. So he was actually out on a boat and he happened to see it. And thank goodness, because otherwise that would have been lost.
Wait, did you say canal? I didn't know Fredericksburg had canals.
Yes, I did. And I suppose we should probably back up a little bit before we get too much into the Batteau to talk about why these boats were here on the Rappahannock in the first place. So are you ready to learn about the Rappahannock navigation system?
Let's go.
I think the most important thing to remember is why Fredericksburg is where it is. So we're situated just below the fall line, which, as many know, is a geographical feature where the upland, more hilly and mountainous regions meet the flatter coastal plain. And this results in a dramatic terrain change that shifts as you move upriver. So suddenly the smooth, uninhibited water by the city docks turns very rocky with lots of rapids. So essentially, these early settlers came as far as they can get with their ships, and boom, we have Fredericksburg. Now, keeping that in mind, in the early 19th century, Fredericksburg was thriving when it came to goods. We were moving tobacco, grain, flour in and out of our ports. It was fantastic. We could get them to and from the Chesapeake, no problem, but that was pretty frustrating for those who wanted to make more money when it came to the Shenandoah Valley. We couldn't get there easily. You can travel by land, but by water was so much quicker. Well, wouldn't you know it, around this time, the Potomac and the James River actually had it figured out. They were using these intricate canal systems to move around these different terrains and obstacles. And essentially, Fredericksburg got wind of this and they said, count me in. That's a great idea. Side note, every year the James River has a Batteau festival where you can see replicas on the water and they're moving them back and forth. It's really cool. So if anyone's interested, you can check those out in June.
I didn't know that happened. We should go sometime, Kylie.
Right? We have to. Okay, now back to Fredericksburg, diving right in on this idea. So in 1811, the General Assembly enacted a law that allowed for opening, approving, and extending the navigation of the Rappahannock. And subsequently, a company was formed to plan and dig these canals, and they were appropriately called the Rappahannock Company. We actually have a really cool seal from the company on display right now, as well as a bond. It's fantastic. Highly recommend.
Are those on the first floor near the Batteau?
Yes, they are, in our little river case. And with these bonds, they actually just started selling shares to anyone who would buy them. They were looking for any and all investors. And I'm about to start giving you some dates, so keep these in mind. This is pretty important. So we started in 1811. Now we're in 1829.
Wait, isn't that almost 2 decades?
Yeah. Yep. Not quite, though. Only 18 years. So 18 years later, and this is all due to funding, is these canals, they were going to be very intensive and expensive. So it's going to take a lot of money. And it's been years of kind of will they, won't they, trying to get money, different people being interested in all of that. And at one point, they even lobbied to the state, they being the city of Fredericksburg and the Rappahannock Company, to ask them for money. And they said, hey, if you don't help us out, well, Fredericksburg, it's just not going to be a thing anymore.
Wow, that's a pretty drastic reaction.
I'm not even kidding. They were that dramatic. Here is the actual quote. "We do sincerely believe that if this work fails, our town is undone. Her trade will be entirely swept away, and a few years will find her among the things that were."
Dang, undone.
It's honestly, I love that for them. You know, if it's going to work by doing that, go ahead. And you know what? It did work. They ended up getting the state to commit a certain amount if they were to reach their fundraising goals. So, you know what? Good for them. Anywho, in January of 1829, construction began on the canal system, and it wasn't without a party because, as we know historically, Fredericksburg loves a good parade or a good party.
Oh, for sure.
And a grand parade took place, and I mean, it was grand. It was led by the Rappahannock Company and Masonic Lodge Number 4, among other dignitaries. There were teachers and pupils, workers, musicians, everyone. Literally everyone and their brother were there. That joke's actually for the Masonic Lodge. They started at Town Hall, and they went down Princess Anne, down Wolf, up Caroline, and they ended up around Prince Edward and Canal Street. So they made this huge loop, and they placed this cornerstone with this silver plate. And so the original cornerstone is actually missing. So if anyone has that in their basement or happens to know the whereabouts of that piece, you can give me a call at 54. You know where to find me. So this all happened in 1829, right? So now we're in 1849.
Wait, another 2 decades?
Yep, we love just jumping 20 years here. So a whole 20 years later, the Rappahannock Company's annual report comes out, and it states that the navigation system is finally completed in a stretch from Fredericksburg to Carter's Run, which is about 52 miles.
Whoa.
Isn't that pretty impressive?
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
Such a feat. And you can see now why it took 20 years. So we'll give them that. Now, this was more expensive than anticipated. We thought the tolls were going to cover the expenses, but it didn't. The locks, dams, and canals also needed a ton of maintenance, which was also costly. So they would essentially get to the end fixing things up and have to go back to the beginning and start over again, which adds up really fast. So between 1849 and 1853, all the money went to repairs. Dividends weren't paid to shareholders. No interest was paid on the state loan. Nothing. And at one point, they even went to the farmers whose property bordered this system, and they said, hey, you can go ahead and use this if you maintain it on your dime. Well, the farmers weren't too keen on that, so they said no. And by 1853, only about 4 years later, the Rappahannock Company foreclosed and the navigation system began to fall away. But money wasn't the only issue here. It was a lot of different factors. So in the same year the construction ended in 1849, a huge change was starting to sweep the area. Can you guess what it was?
Is it trains? Please tell me it's trains.
Yes. You're such a good historian. So the Orange and Alexandria Railroad was incorporated that same year and made everything so much easier, cheaper, and quicker. It ultimately sealed the fate of the navigation system and the Rappahannock Company, which makes sense. Can you imagine those board meeting those? They were probably just like, oh, bummer.
Oh, for sure.
That's an exact quote. It has to be. So this ultimately ended its run with an impressive 47 locks and 15 miles of canals.
Wow, that's so impressive.
Isn't it? Now, just as the Orange and Alexandria Railroad derailed this project, pun intended, I have derailed us talking about the Batteau. So let's go ahead and get back to that.
So I guess the real question, Kylie, is what remains?
So we know we have the Batteau fragments, which I'll get to in a second. I want to note something that also remains. This will actually be a whole other episode, but it's a series of locks. 7 of these locks were made of stone, which means they're still visible today, or at least the ruins of them. If you visit the museum, you can see a picture of Taylor's Lock that's located over by the quarry. It's really cool. It's the big stone walls that these Batteaus would have to slide through. But again, these are another conversation.
So tell us more about the boat.
Yes. Okay. Back to the boat for real this time. As I mentioned, these boats were long, pretty much the length of a semi-truck with the cab on them, if you can picture that right now. Our fragment is only about 20% of the actual length. It's a small chunk of the hull and about half of the bow, and it's still a very impressive size. It took multiple people a lot of maneuvering to get it in.
And lots of measuring.
11 times. I measured that gallery 11 times to make sure that would fit. It was the longest day of my life. But anyway, so in addition to being these huge boats, they could also hold a ton of cargo. They could transport around 200 barrels, and that would equate to about 25 tons.
Wow, that's a lot of products.
Yeah, so if this all went great and the trains didn't swoop in, imagine, what could be moving.
So Kylie, can you tell us a little bit more about how bateaus worked?
Yeah, of course. The crew was made of 3 men, and they were called polers. We don't know much about these men, but we do know that oftentimes enslaved and free African Americans made up these crews. So these crews on the bateaus, in order to propel it, they would be stationed in different locations. So you would have one man in the back of the boat, because there was a rudder on the back, and he would be in charge of making sure we're moving in a straight line. The other 2 would be stationed on the port and the starboard side. And along the top of the bateau on each side were these long planks that were pretty much even with the top, just a little bit below, and those were called walkboards. So the 2 men on the walkboards would have long wooden poles, and one would be in the front, one would be in the back, and the one in the front would place the pole into the bottom of the river and walk it to the back, while the other one comes to the front, so they're kind of moving against each other. And this would propel the boat forward about 50 feet. That's not even the full length of the bateau. So you can imagine the amount of work that took just to get the 52 some odd miles to their destination.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, and actually, Bill Trout, the author of the Rappahannock Scenic River Atlas, did the math. So those 52 miles would result in the polers walking the length of the boat roughly 10,982 times.
Wow, I can't imagine.
Yeah, it is a fantastic and fascinating piece of history, and we're so lucky to have this object. And I highly recommend everybody come and check it out. It's just so cool to look at. And we have so many other river artifacts too that will hopefully over time help build on the story so we can remember all the work that was done and the people who had to do the work. It just blows my mind.
Well, thanks for sharing it with me, Kylie.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for listening, and thanks everyone else. And we hope you tune in next time to find out what remains. On today's episode, many of the resources I consulted come from the Rappahannock Scenic River Atlas by Bill Trout and the Rappahannock Canal by Donald S. Callahan. I want to extend a couple thank yous out to Friends of the Rappahannock, Hal Wiggins, Bill Mix, Bill Trout, the Fauquier Historical Society, Scottsville Museum, and the donors who helped make this exhibit a reality for us, and so many more. History is not told alone, and we have so many brilliant people here in town who help keep these stories alive. So thank you all for the support.